bit deeper into differentiating the different type of thinking about strategy, and also taking a look at a couple of frameworks. One of them is TOP strategic planning framework. How many of you are familiar with TOP methodology as a facilitation tool in general? Nice. Some of you are. So that would look familiar to you. Others who, for whom it's new, please pause and ask questions if you would like, to make sure that you understand what it is. It is a set of steps, so to speak, right, to get us from where we're now, understanding where we're now, to making sure we have the picture of the future and the way to get there. And then I would like to also pair it with the Hue strategic thinking. And Hue, which is, as you probably have already recognized, part of the team name that we have, Hue Life. Hue stands for Human Understanding and Engagement. So if we explore different groups of individuals and people coming together to do strategic work around mostly community building is what we are focusing here in Minnesota, we've learned that, you know, it's not so much sometimes about the tools, it's a lot more about who we are as individuals and how different we are. So embracing differences and bringing everybody together so everybody's voice is heard and is valued in that type of thinking. We traditionally think of strategy is something that belongs at the top, right? The executive leadership gets together and figures out what the strategy is. In this case, both from top strategic planning perspective and the set of values in which that methodology is based, it is important to ensure that the whole system is included. Otherwise, as we all know, culture gets in the way. So we will get into the concept of culture and change in a little bit with that definition. So as you can see, our objectives are pretty straightforward. Let's explore together what that means for us in terms of strategy and being strategic, the difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning, and review some of those frameworks that I find helpful. So I have a couple of cases to share, but I also would want to include you to share your examples as well. We'll end with some Q&A and debriefing of our experience, and hopefully you'll walk away with your own point of view, what strategy formation is all about, especially as it comes to culture change. I'm going to skip this particular slide because we already verbalized it and go right into this activity, deciding what color socks to wear and deciding how to put off doing laundry. So those are two decisions you'll have to make in the next 5 minutes. I'll put you in breakout rooms for that. When you get into your breakout room, there will be pairs. Actually, let's make it triads. So what your assignment is, think of today. How did you decide today? How did you decide today what socks to wear? And then also think about, in general, when you're planning doing laundry, how do you go about making some decisions around doing laundry? When you come back, we will just share some of those insights as to how is your decision-making process might be different from one decision to another. Okay, is that clear? So talk about the socks you choose this morning and how did you decide which one and how do you go about making decision around laundry? Awesome. So you're going to have about 5 minutes in your breakout rooms. Go ahead and join. You do have a choice to not join if you wish not, but that way, you know, there might be somebody without a partner. So go ahead. I'll see you in 5 minutes. We are resuming recording as per reminder. So let's go ahead and hear a couple, not everybody, but whoever compelled, share with us what was the difference in your mind between decision around what socks to wear this morning versus deciding how to put off laundry. Just come on mute, off mute, I should say, and share with us what the difference was.
This is Dennis. For me, the big difference, it's really, you never really think about how much you think about it. But like we were talking about how the socks this morning were what I had on last night. Our weather's changing here, so it's getting cooler. So it's the socks I had on last night, and I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning, so I just kept them on. So it was more maybe not tactical, but more just practical in a sense of being strategic, or maybe it was maybe tactical, keeping them on last night because it was cold. So
great, thank you. Somebody else?
It's Jamie here. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, thank you. I was in Dennis's group, and so Jade and Dennis and I were overwhelmed with choices and how tactical and strategic we actually became when we thought about it. We had no idea that, you know, if you wanted to wear like black t-shirts and black pants and black socks, that was actually a really good tactical washing decision. It meant it was easier. But yeah, it was just surprising how many, when we thought about it, just the choice between dry cleaning or hand washing and machine washing, they're very strategic. And yeah, it surprised us how those decisions are made. And we had a great deal of fun talking about it.
Good. Awesome. Thank you. And I hope that everybody had some fun talking about it. But today we're not talking about socks. So let's move on and continue to think about it. The reason I'm bringing this activity forward, not just for us to have fun, but I found that activities like that, when we start talking about strategy around culture change, it's important to start with something people can relate, especially when we begin to engage them in the type of thinking we want them to engage. So having examples like that or metaphors, culturally relevant, that your participants can wrap their head around and get engaged with, and then you can use that language throughout, right? So then can we say, when we get into tactical thinking, you can say, hey, you're talking about socks. Let's move on and talk about laundry. So figure out the way to help your people be part of the process. So what does it have to do with change then? So what is the relationship between, in your mind, strategy, strategic thinking or planning, and change? Let's just hear a couple of thoughts on that. Come off mute and share. What do you think? What's the relationship between strategy and change? Hearing none, I'll just go and ramble off my tongue what I think about that. So did I just hear somebody coming up?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I was going to say is when very often when we think about strategy and we think about change, and then I'll add a word to that, change management, is that to me, when we're thinking about strategy, and a lot of the work I do, most of the work is corporate strategy. So the change management piece is you do that because, not because there is change, but because we think that there is likely going to be resistance to the change. So that's how I see the difference between strategy and, now I said change management. So I'm not sure if when you said change, if that's what you were referring to. But anyway, that's kind of what comes to mind for me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don, very much. Well, in my book, if we are not going to change anything, why even bother with strategy? So the point there is we need to be strategic about something that is going to change, whether it's internally, certain things we need to do differently or stop doing. Somebody shared earlier, it's not just what we're going to do, but also what we're not going to do. What are we going to do differently? It's in response to either internal environment or external environment or both. But in any case, change is going to be part of the implementation of that new strategy, right? So the formula that I'd like for you to be perhaps aware of, if you aren't so far, developed in early 70s, I believe, 1977, there it is on the slide, by Harris and Beckhard. And it still stays true today, especially for those of you who are change management practitioners. We all know that we are constantly planning for the resistance to the change we're trying to implement, that is hopefully articulated and decided through some sort of strategic initiative, strategic planning or thinking initiative. So what this means is that if any of the elements on the left, which is dissatisfaction with the status quo or with our current reality, or vision of the positive and possible new future, or clarity around the first steps in that direction, if any one of those is zero, then resistance will win. Resistance to change will prevail. For us as facilitators and change managers, what does that mean? That means that when we are planning strategically for a change to occur, especially if it's a cultural change, which in many cases, no matter what we change, culture will have to follow, right? It has to adapt to align with that new way of thinking, way of being, doing different things. So we need to plan then in our process to create that sense of urgency, that there is no more dissatisfaction. We need to make sure that people engaged in that process, those who we want to change, understand why it's important. If we don't change, we're going to die. If we don't change, we're not going to have a company. If we don't change, go on and on and on. Then that's not enough. We also need to make sure that our individual actors, so to speak, can picture what it looks like on the other end. It's too scary to jump off the cliff and not knowing where I'm going to land. So helping create that shared vision, shared is our bias. Not every organization or team believes in that. We believe that it has to be shared. There is a way to bring everybody together and build a shared picture of the future. And then, of course, if I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow towards that, chances are a year later, I'm still going to be sitting here dissatisfied and frustrated, not knowing exactly what am I supposed to do to move forward in that direction. So those are the three key pieces that are necessary for culture change to happen, or for a strategy to work in general. So when you look at cultural awareness, I think you somebody have shared that with me already, with us, with our team. If we're not aware of what those cultural elements are, no matter what kind of initiative we put in place to grow or to innovate or to improve performance, it's not going to work. One of the Peters, you help me which one, either Peter Drucker or I think talks about culture eating strategy for what? For breakfast, for lunch, or for dinner, for all three. It doesn't matter. So being aware of where those patterns and cultural, historical, traditional habits and practices are lying within the new way of doing things is very important, so we can be strategic about that. So let's go back into breakout rooms. This time you'll hopefully have another partner and talk about the change that you've been part of in pairs. Share example of cultural changes, whether you were one facilitating it or you were one part of the team implementing it for yourself. So talk about what was that change, what happened, what was difficult, and what made it work. And if it didn't work, that's good to know too. So you will have about 10 minutes here in breakout rooms. This time, pairs, go ahead and let's see, do I have 10 minutes? Yes, I'm opening up the rooms. Good luck, have fun. I will move from here.
Hi, are we in the breakout room now? No, we are not. I think we are not assigned.
We are not in the breakout.
We stayed
Yet.
there. Okay. But I think we can consider ourselves in the breakout room. We are only 3 of us now. Or with Irina, we are 4 of us.
Yeah. Maybe we can.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Alice, where are you?
I'm from the Philippines. Well, okay, you want to start with me?
Yes, why not?
Fond. Okay, I was involved in a big project. I'm the team leader, and it's a department. It was a project funded by Australia. And the big change there, cultural change, is that once the peace agreement was signed, then the department will become an oversight instead of operational. So that was a big change for the whole organization, and their competencies. So it was a competency-based transformation. So their leadership competencies are the framework. It's changing also. So we had it's really a big initiative for the department. So what happened? What happened was there was a lot of like silos, there was faction between the undersecretaries, 2 factions. So there's a lot of politics going on. So that was the difficulty in the project, because it's highly complex, and there was an anti-corruption lens there. So we need to implement system to remove corruption. So the change was the resistance to change was so strong, especially for those who have been with the department for quite some time. Well, what made it work was the executive champion. There was a strong executive champion from the secretary. So attendance to the workshops and the coaching was mandated. It's a mandate coming down from the secretary. So I think that was what made it effective.
From top to down.
Yeah, there's a mandate that they have to be there. So that's what made it work. A strong executive champion.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Alice and Fonda, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Irina.
Do you mind if I move you to a different room? There's one person by themselves.
Okay, sure.
Oh, why don't you move her here, Irina?
Oh, I can move her here. You're right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so what about you, Fonda?
I live in Turkey. I live in between Istanbul and Berlin now, Germany and Turkey. And I spent 10 years in Istanbul as an activist to protect to protect the rights of a Roma neighborhood. And the change was the municipality wanted to demolish the neighborhood. They demolished it. But the change was that the community gained confidence in themselves. what was difficult was to make the community to raise voice. But as the fight went on, as the protest went on in the long time, you know, with many activities, they gained confidence for themselves. So it worked in a sense that we empowered the community, but it didn't work in a sense that we couldn't stop the demolishments. I think, Alice, as in your case, what is this? I think, Alice, in your case, it's very important that from top to down, there is a decision to stop corruption, but also it's important to develop, to raise voice from bottom to up.
And that's the reason why coaching was incorporated in the program.
Yeah.
There was a facilitated workshop, but there's also one-on-one executive coaching program that executive coaching program that went on. And there was a team coaching. So there's many layers in the intervention to support the change process. So there was facilitated workshop. There was they have to create an output like a manual to define their new roles. So there were a lot of activities. And again, the resistance was one of the resistance that was coming is producing the manuals, the operation, the new operational manual.
Alice, is there a website or something about the project?
There was a
website, information online.
No, that was highly confidential
that's
because the
the
department was handling the peace process, meaning to say they handle the peace process between the Muslim separatists. It's armed conflict. So they're handling the peace negotiation among, we have 6 groups. You have the longest armed conflict in the Philippines, Muslim against the government, Communist Party against the government. And then there are other regional groups. And these are all like really conflict areas, war. So these are the department that we're handling. So if the peace process is the negotiation is sealed, then the function, the mandate of the department changes. And they did change. So that was passed, and it led to the new law. It led to a law and a new, like a government, a independent government in that certain areas. So the agree. What I was talking about the project like 5 years ago. So the change has already happened, but it was like bloody, very complicated.
I am so glad to hear this, Alice. I really need to hear examples like that.
Yeah, I can relate to you because there's a lot of, in that big project, there are small areas where areas are demolished. They have to go to another because of the war, because of a local conflict. So yeah, it's
But is there any way I can read and learn more about this?
I don't think they will publish it because of national security issue.
Or maybe if you send me your email, maybe I can consult you.
Maybe we can talk about it, but I certainly will not be able to share you documents. It's
no problem. No problem.
Non-disclosure.
Non-disclosure. No problem. Just
okay.
Yeah.
But it was well funded. It was funded by Australia. The change process.
Okay.
The intervention.
And somehow it worked. It was not easy, but it worked.
It wasn't
somehow.
easy.
All right, we are coming back. Thank you so much. And we have a couple more joining us on this session. We will not be doing introductions right now, but just say hi and chat, please, for us. I'm trying to disable this. Okay, there we go. Let's hear some insights from your conversation, one or two from breakout rooms. What was that made the change effort work? Let's hear what was that made the change effort work. Nothing? There must be something that worked. There
Okay,
was-
I'll start. So in the group that that I was in, I was speaking. We were in Paris, and so it is a large multinational corporation, and this was the affiliate in a particular country in the world. And so what made the change work, it was a really interesting conversation, was the fact that what I heard is there was some top-down approaches as well as bottom-up feedback. So there was that. There was also kind of the use of the unofficial leaders who were the, for lack of a better word, like the cultural leaders of the organization that helped to explain to people the change and what was happening. And also what worked in the change, I think, in this particular example was that the recognition that not everyone will be able to make the transition from the current state to the future state. And so, you know, and while we need to let people mourn the current state, and some people will make it over the bridge, that there will be people, unfortunately, who are not able to make that change. And the recognition that that's a normal but sad part of the process. So that's kind of a summary of what we talked about. Super interesting.
Great, thank you, Don. Let's hear one more example.
I can go. Me and Jade talked a lot about, I think one of the common things was in that strategy, the pinpoint, finding that either that pain point or something that was relatable to get especially leaders on board, and really use an example of experience. And one of the things she brought up was about change and actually taking leaders to see other people do it and them have that experience of other teams doing it or another company doing it versus just theory in that way. So, and she said that really helped them kind of move a needle, which I thought was really effective.
Absolutely.
I just want to add to that point that Dennis is making, is that, and I think it's such an important point when we're talking about change, is that recognizing that there is a need for change, and the fact that staying where we are, so as, let's say, as the company, the client, staying where we are is not an option. And I think a lot of companies who say that they're risk averse, and they say, so we're going to keep doing what we're doing. What I think they don't realize is that by staying the way that you are is risk. You are introducing risk at that point, and that seeing, when they see that change is absolutely necessary, that can be the kind of the pin, I think you said, Dennis, that helps people to know to start the transition.
Great, thank you. And Alice.
Okay, I was talking about, I think me and Fanda was doing the opposite. I was sharing to her what made the change process happen was a very strong executive champion on the, so it lessened, like it lessened, especially for government where it's very bureaucratic, like an executive presence or a mandate from the top is will hasten the change process. But also in the design, the one-on-one coaching also increase the involvement of people. So it's a mixture of top-down and bottoms-up process that assisted. I think this is also true for Funda, for her project, where there's a very strong involvement of the baseline of the bottom. So again, it's a combination of strong executive presence and the involvement of it's like a bottoms up and a top down approach simultaneous will make the change process faster.
Great, thank you, Alice. And Vaishali, I thought you had a hand up too.
Yeah, mine was just another additional point around not all times do the decision makers get to understand the pulse of, of the change impact. So it's very essential that they have a direct, a direct view to the impacted space of the change. Because in my case, a lot of the proactiveness in adopting to change, or the options that somebody can opt while navigating the change, came from the group that was affected because of the change, right? So it's also important while we have the top-down approach that the pulse of the affected group is always kept in mind, and they have that, loop to have a conversation with the decision makers.
Great, thank you. And Jamie.
Thank you for that. What a rich discussion. I'm enjoying this. It's fantastic. I work in a large organization, and everything that you've been sharing has been happening where we are. With the addition, there's always a range of resources available. And so we've talked about top down and bottom up, and about a range of executive people, leading that change, but just having a range of resources. And we're doing this across large branches at the moment, and even larger units, where you just get people to sit down, develop a plan, and they share it, they own it, and then they're responsible for rolling it out. And that just changes people's behaviour. And I guess that's what we've been working on, changing their values and changing their, or not changing values, but using a set of values and helping it to change behaviour.
Great, thank you, Jamie. And let's take one more from Andrew and move on to the framework review.
Yeah, very, very quickly, I shared an experience, a recent experience in facilitating a group which had to redo a vision and relaunch an association. And specifically what was difficult was creating a safe space where it was a participatory exercise. So creating a safe space where people could feel safe enough to share what was not working, what were the difficulties, what were the contradictions with the vision which might have come out. And I think what worked well was that in creating the safe space, everyone felt that he had contributed, that he had shared, and we could then move on to examine how we could together go beyond these difficulties. So that was, what I want to say.
Great, thank you so much. Let's keep some additional thoughts and comments for the debrief at the end of our session. I know we are all right now experiencing perhaps some insights, more to share, more to say, but I wanted to make sure that those of you who are not familiar also understand that there are tools. There are tools like top strategic planning process that is very helpful in what you are describing necessary, which is engaging multiple stakeholders at different levels, top, bottom, middle, in the process of strategy formation. And this particular framework worked really well for us. I think there is just no other way to do it other than understanding that strategic planning is not a linear process. It's messy, and setting the stage for making sure that everybody involved kind of anticipates and expects that it's an ongoing process. It's never ending process. You can't just set the 5-year goal and then expect that to happen in the way you planned it. A year from now, the life will be different. So what it means is starting with the change we want in mind. spending some time collectively educating, creating that sense of urgency, and crafting your strategic question. What is the question we're trying to answer by engaging in this planning process? Then once we know and create that sense of urgency, or the burning platform, whichever term you prefer to use, then what would the end look like? Help people describe the end result so they know and feel more safe and comfortable moving that direction, and inspired, hopefully, as well. But that is where most strategic planning, I would believe, tools are in alignment, and then failing to focus on this element of what's in the way. That's the culture piece right here. What's in the way of us achieving this vision? Why haven't we done this already? What's preventing us? Once we know what that is, what those barriers and what is in top language underlying contradictions are, then how do we overcome those barriers and move toward our vision? So our strategy is not detached from those cultural patterns, but they're embedded, and they're targeting specific areas of who we are and how we are in order to get to that new state. And then we can talk about who's doing what and by when. The first step, which we talked about in the change formula, what is it going to happen tomorrow in my job that's different, that I need to pay attention to and make sure I contribute to this change process? So when you put it on a timeline, typically we're talking about a practical vision or desired result, looking out 3 to 5 years. Most people can see beyond 4, honestly, right? Some people can see beyond 2. So really thinking about a time horizon that makes sense. Goals and strategy are around 2 years. Let's not worry about spelling out all of the details around specifics, because life changes, things happen. And then, of course, tactical decisions and tactical projects need to be spelled out as well and planned out within the next year. And that's what we're focusing on the year 1, just to gain that momentum going and get us going. So in red, cultural impediments is what makes top strategic planning specifically powerful, because it does, assume and allocates time in the process to focus just on that. And what it looks like in many cases, what are some of our policies that are interfering with our desired future? What some of the processes, procedures, traditions, how we do things, who we are, that's going to be in the way of our new desired future. And then we combine that with thinking model. And when I was talking earlier about thinking, strategic thinking, that is in addition to planning tools and process we use, engaging people in different kinds of thinking along the way. You start always with the data, right? What's the database that we're operating from? What happened, which helps us to, in essence, create the sense of urgency. Once we know, once we see the numbers, it's easier to get behind what's going, why we need to change. The other one, the second flow, in order for you to follow this process, it's really not a process. It's just understanding that the different people will be in different places on this journey, and making sure we're encouraging them and engaging them in this way. So if you're not a data type of person, you need to learn how to be that. So facilitation helps us to get those who are strong in that area shine and add value. Those who are not, learn and express, and be part of that as well. Emotive thinking, what's in it for me? Yeah, I get it, I understand. So why shouldn't I retire, or why shouldn't I resist, right? So what's in it for me to help move this forward? I just had a project with the city this week, and half of the executive team is planning on retiring this year, and we're engaging in this really big strategic process. And it's not until we got to that question, like, what's your legacy, right? So the only way to grab them and their attention and have them be part of the process is to encourage them to think about it as their legacy. What do you want to leave behind? And there's lots of conversation, good conversation around that. Once we understand what's happening, the data that's telling us we need to change, what's in it for me that is associated with this change, then let's envision what's possible, what if. So the visionary thinking, following the same flow, so to speak, that strategic planning tool from Technology of Participation offers, In this case, making sure that you are doing activities and exercises to encourage that type of thinking. Not everybody is a visionary. So how do we help people to get in that space and participate confidently? And then really great vision, what's, how do we help them be more critical about themselves, right? So there's a little bit of a critical thinking that's required to look inside, not so much, the weather in Minnesota is bad in the winter, therefore we can't have A, Y, or Z. I get that, but given what we want to see happen, why are we not able to do it already? So why is it so difficult? Why not? And many tools are possible here. In top strategic planning, the underlying contradiction workshops works great. In other, you could do force field analysis, you could do SWOT, you can do other things right here. And this is my pet peeve. Don't do SWOT without context. It needs context, right? So if you are using SWOT in relationship to what? So in this case, it's in relationship to our desired future. What are those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges? And please do add some questions also to that activity to help them understand their own involvement in how they contribute to the patterns that we're trying to change. And then only after that, we can engage in the action-oriented thinking. So now what? What are some of the things that we need to do to move forward in anticipation? So I think I feel I have a hand. Alice, do you have a comment?
Oh, I was just, I wanted to say that when you gathered all the answers to the questions, and if you can put it in a communication plan, if you input that in a communication plan, then that will really help the change process.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the communication plan, same thing, incorporating different types of thinking / learning, right? Both are two sides of the same coin. Make sure that there is in your communication clear data points, clear messaging around how it relates or should relate to individual people so they can see themselves in it and the impact it will have on it. Articulate what is the end or what success would look like, visionary, why and why not, how it's going to be hard or not, and what do we need to do in order to address some of those challenges, and then the action. So even in the communication piece, I think it's important to lay it out in the way that all 5 different styles, thinking and learning styles, will relate to and get that message that you're trying to get across. So with that, I just wanted to share a couple of case studies here and tie it back to both of those frameworks. Very recent, one town of Nags Head, North Carolina, and one city of Horace, North Dakota. So both communities are experiencing tremendous change. Both communities are struggling internally with what it means for them. In North Dakota, as you all probably heard, oil fields and the towns were just struggling with understanding what needs to, the infrastructure wasn't there to accommodate all these people who came to work in the oil industry. And in this particular community, within 1 year, it tripled its population, right? And now you're having the individuals who live there experiencing the influx of different types of people, that there was a clash in terms of preserving their culture and trying to build something new. And then in Nags Head, in North Carolina, it's all about tourism. And so really experiencing some challenges and difficulties around saving the environment and how tourists are not necessarily taking care of the community in the way that the local residents would like to see it have been taken care of. So you have lots of rental properties are now more common than used to be. So you have this different mentality and different needs and wants as a result of that. And with Nags Head specifically, and with City of Horace, who are the people who are trying to navigate and manage the changes, are typically your municipal government staff workers who are also experiencing those stresses themselves because they live in that community. So they have this dual role and conflict within themselves. So the question, strategic question, looks like this, and this was for the city of Horace. What needs to happen in the next 3 to 5 years for Horace to become a community with a high quality of life and expanding economic opportunities, which embraces its historic heritage? That's the key there, because they were feeling, the people were feeling that they're losing their historic heritage with the growth as it was occurring, and protecting the environment, right? So that was a big question we started with. And then thinking about envisioning that spiral for top strategic planning framework and engaging people in different ways of thinking, going through what does it look like when we have in 5 years accomplished this. Let's describe that. What is in the way, and their strategies from their actions and implementation steps. But to get there, collecting data, we were talking about data and the importance of collecting data. We call it data thinking, helping people both collect it, understand it, digest it, process it, learn from it. And in this case, how can we do that? Well, the most typical way is the survey, polling, surveys. There's so many, technologies are a friend at this point in time, and there's so much that we can utilize in order to help us. In this particular town in Horace, you can see that we looked at north, center, east, center, west, and south of town. So we needed to look at the different pockets of that particular community so that the committee that was working on this particular strategic initiative could understand where they need to get more buy-in, where they need to put more focus on. So that was the geographic representation of this particular town that was necessary for us to understand where those voices, pro and against, are coming from, so we can work with that. In emotive thinking, what's in it for me? What is my experience in relationship to this? How can we do that? We can do that now with Zoom and virtual environment. You can do so many different ways, engaging folks, just like what we're doing right now, right? Focus groups, ask questions, get them an opportunity to voice their concerns, express and share their views. So interviews, focus groups, reflections on the data sets, and really engaging in difficult conversations before we start envisioning and before we start the planning process. So all of that specific data, factual data, and I don't want to call it anecdotal data, but emotive thinking also provides a set of data, how people feel about certain things and where are they on the spectrum of supporting or resisting. In NextHead, for example, it was all cultural internally. The biggest challenge there is that the team members, the executive team members themselves, were feeling attacked. They were feeling that they were not supported. They were feeling that they had been retaliated against. It's a small town, and it's a coastal town, right? Outer Banks, if you have seen some of the movies around that, there's a flavor there. So we really focused on, so in order for any of us to get on board and work as a team, we first need to fix ourselves. And so really the issue was, how do we become a high-performing NextHead team? And what will we be known for as we move forward with this big undertaking? And you can see that there is a lot of trust that needed to be built, a lot of ownership, a lot of expression that there needs to be a collective commitment. So that alone was half a day just to get to that point. Once we have that underway, both in Horace, community members understanding the change and what's in it for them, and in NextHead, staff understanding what it's going to take for them to be a team to do this work, then we could focus on the vision, right? Identifying practical vision that represents everybody's little bit of the piece of the puzzle. And I'm imagining that all of you know and have facilitated collective, collaborative vision with your clients and your groups. There's great consensus workshop approach that works. It helps bring everybody's perspective into the conversation. So this is an example, Town of NextHead Vision for 2025. And you can see that, in many cases, it doesn't maybe sound a whole lot different from some other communities that you've been part of, but because they created it, the words are theirs, what makes a big difference, right? In 2025, NextHead let's, for example, take a last one, is collaborating to identify regional needs and develop solutions. That is a vision of collaborating with other towns and other municipalities, renting private property owners. So they're realizing that they cannot do any of it alone. Beach nourishment is a big issue. Water quality is a big issue. Post-hurricane recovery is a big issue. So what can we do to develop that collaborative culture across region in order to address those big stuff? So that was visioning. Once we got the visioning thinking captured and articulated, then what is our role in figuring out how to address some of the issues? Contradictory thinking is what we call contradictions workshop in strategic planning, right? Really understanding that contradictions isn't something that needs to be fixed. Contradictions is something that needs to be managed. It's also described sometimes as polarities, right? We have two different sets of values. They are contradicting each other. Not that one is better than the other. They're both true. We want quality of life and we want lower taxes. So great. What is our strategy to hold both true? And sometimes SWOT and force field analysis helps with that. Sometimes it's not the best tool. So think about different tools that might be helpful depending on the context in which we work and the type of people we are working with. In this particular next head situation, we really dove deeper into specific challenges and used this approach that we call strategic juncture analysis, which is figuring out different ways of asking about the same thing, right? Different questions that really illuminating about, in context of those different areas that they wanted to focus on, illuminating what is surfacing by asking different questions. 2 or 3 themes keep coming up, right? 2 or 3 ideas keep coming up. And usually with the change efforts, it's not a surprise to you. There's always something around communication. There's always something about leadership, right? So we're really now focusing on what do we need to do in order to be on the same page? What do we need to do in order to collaborate better? And then what are those key stakeholder groups that we need to focus on? And then finally, action-oriented thinking, determining the implementation journey, including the timelines and names. You know, it's amazing the power of putting your name on something and making sure that you have a deadline makes all the difference. There's different ways to do it, different priority tools that you can use. And so what it looks like in our case here with next head is really just articulating what is our first year actions going to be and what are those 2-year results. And we tried as much as we can to get to the dates, not maybe specific date, but at least month or quarter that they can hold themselves accountable to ensure that they're moving forward. So with that, I would like to pause here for a second. We briefly reviewed the frameworks and talked about these 2 cases. I'd like you now in another opportunity to meet a couple more individuals from this team to talk about your cases. So think about, this is a debrief now conversation in small groups. And the purpose of this debrief to process with somebody else what you just heard. How is it similar or different from your experience? Where did you resonate with this particular approach or what I had to share? And then come back and share with us your point of view. So the share out is going to be what is based on your experience and based on what you've learned today, what is your point of view on facilitating cultural change? Okay. And we have 15 minutes left. So let's do 10 minutes. And when you come back, we'll wrap up with closing. So Sona, are you in a different room?
interesting society, but it's great. Quebec, I'm originally from Ontario, but Dennis, like Quebecers in a session, they're amazing because they arrive ready to party. So you're
Yes,
right.
yes.
They are a great audience. They're
Don,
like, they arrive laughing. So
Don and Dennis, break is coming up. You guys have to.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, we have to stop. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, but let's hear some insights from each group. If we can, we only have 3 minutes left. I'll start with Alice and Joyce. Joyce-na, if you guys can tell us what was a point of view that you're developing as a result of your conversation on facilitating culture change.
Are you going to go ahead, Elias? She was sharing some interesting insight.
Alice, you are muted. I'm not hearing you. Or something's going on in
Just maybe you can do the sharing of what we discussed.
Okay. So, so basically, I have spoken about in my organization how we have gone ahead and defined the vision, the values. You know, what we saw is basically we in terms of data, we looked at past. You know, what was the journey so far? You know, what were the highs, what were the lows for the company, and you know, that journey really helped us. You know, how we really came through, and we also saw about you know, what really you know, binding these people in this organization. You know, why people are so stuck with this organization, and we also said what people do not like about the organization. That also came out as a culture. You know, then we defined the values. We basically looked at you know, say 5 years down the line, where do you see, you know, that visualization we have done, that was quite interesting. So similar to this, in fact, Elias, she has shared something very, very interesting. She facilitated a similar session for a NGO for old age people, and when you know, she has defined it, the values they have defined, they also define the behaviors which will drive those values, you know, and then those values were more alive, and they were so driven that, you know, they really designed a lot of workshop to you know, facilitate and spread that awareness with others. And you know, they were all charged in terms of taking responsibility, taking accountability after the session. So that was very, very interesting.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we won't have time to go through all of the rooms, but let's hear from one more insight from a different conversation about a new point of view that you're developing.
I can just jump in really quick. I think one insight we talked about is honor what people are going to lose when change happens. That was a gem from Paul in Manchester, UK. And I think that's so important. We can't just sort of assume what people think. We can't even just treat it as a bunch of focus groups and then be done with it. I think we have to have that empathy and honor what people lose, let them go through the loss, legitimize that. I thought that was quite powerful.
Great, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for joining me. I apologize for all the challenges getting into the room. For those of you who have experienced that, I will upload the slides so you can find it within the workshop materials in the future. And I'm going to leave you with just one point of view and a tip and a message. Treat people as they want to be treated, right? And let's just work with humans as humans. No matter where they are, what they're experiencing, executive level or not, we have the same values. So bringing those values in the conversation is the key. And if we can do that as facilitators, I think we're going to make a difference in the world. So thank you. Have an enjoyable conference, and I'll see you at some point later.
Thank you so much for a
Yeah, thank
wonderful
you.
session.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Yeah, thanks,
much.
Irina. That was lovely.
Thank
Really
you.
good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Really good.
Bye.
Thank-
Thank you, Irina.
Bye.
Thank you.